I would want to begin, Mr. Speaker, with my trip recently to Montserrat, returned last night, and to indicate, Mr. Speaker, to the country that I was able to sign with IWECO and GCF a project for gut stabilization. IWECO, Integrated Watershed Land and Ecosystems Management, is a UN environment body based in Jamaica. The project, Mr. Speaker, is over a few years, 2 or 3 years, a $4.3 million project. But I can indicate to the country that what we signed a few days ago will bring $999,000 US to the Federation to assist us with gut stabilization. You're aware, Mr. Speaker, that with the demise of sugar, where the estates took responsibility for much of the stabilization work around the country, we have had to rely primarily on SIDF. And so it was an important decision to engage regional and international organizations to help us with the project of stabilization, given the fact that my Prime Minister a while ago indicated the prospects for more hurricanes and more severe hurricanes. This gut stabilization is important to us. The work will be concentrated in the first part on College Street gut. I'm sure you're aware, Mr. Speaker, that that is one of the guts that, when heavy rains fall, creates a serious hazard to persons who operate in the business places downtown, shutting off sometimes our main road and indeed filling the nearby beaches, preventing boats from being able to dock properly. So I want to, at this point, thank the organization, IWECO, and Jeff for supporting our request for stabilizing our guts in St. Kitts and in Nevis. Mr. Speaker, the second thing I would want to make a statement on is Spooner's rehabilitation project. Mr. Speaker, as you're aware, dating all the way back into the 80s, you have heard from various political parties about restoration of the Spooner's ginnery. We, this new administration, recognizing that nothing has really happened at the Spooner's ginnery, sought and got support through the organization from the United States, the sum of $68,000 US towards the first phase of the rehabilitation of the Spooner's ginnery. Of course, Mr. Speaker, as usual, we did not obtain enough resources overseas for these projects, and my Minister of Finance was kind enough to entertain the request made by the Ministry of Human Settlement, entertain the request for additional funding to complete the first phase. And so I want to thank the Ministry of Finance, the ministry, for supporting us with an additional $300,000 to be able to undertake the first phase of that project. Well, once Cabinet has approved, as far as I'm concerned, it is done. Whether I have the money or not, and Cabinet has approved, it's done. Yes. Mr. Speaker, I also want to make a comment on the statements being made in the press. And I did not want to respond to that under personal explanations, since it is not necessarily directly the minister alone, but the processes of government which is under attack by wannabe politicians. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to read from a minute dated June 19, 2018, under the hand of the Director of Institutional Nursing Services. It reads, Mr. Speaker, the heading is, piloting of the 12-hour shift on the surgical ward and the intensive care unit, 2 units. This is important, Mr. Speaker, because of what has been said in the public square.
By the leader of the opposition.
And it reads, Mr. Speaker, in a recent staff meeting, June 6th, staff meeting, June 6th, it was unanimously decided to pilot the 12-hour shift in an effort to address some of the staffing concerns. Mr. Speaker, you know why they have to address staffing concerns? Because wannabe politicians who are doctors are giving many persons in that same institution 2 and 3 weeks sick leave, creating problems
For small things.
for a small institution like the JNF.
You're doing.
And so when they do things like that and then go public to make statements, I have to respond, Mr. Speaker. The minute goes on to say, please be informed that the managers of the surgical ward and intensive care unit agreed to pilot this activity. They agreed to do a pilot project. This is something which happens in Jamaica, or several of the other OECS territories, the 12-hour project. And there are benefits to it. Yes, it is true that we have efficiently carried out the 8-hour shift, but there's nothing wrong, Mr. Speaker, with doing a pilot project to understand the benefits, what can be gained from having also included a 12-hour shift. And so, Mr. Speaker, when doctors who are given privilege at the JNF, and in my opinion, abusing the privilege by walking around with the hospital with students from an institution called Windsor, making personal money. Perhaps we have to look at that privilege, Mr. Speaker, because privilege, to my mind, should be limited to when you send anyone to the institution, the hospital. If that patient wants you to serve them, they make a request. You can't walk into the hospital because you send a patient and the patient is your patient unless you get permission, approval, a request from the patient and approved by the institution, because there are liability issues. And we're going to be more strict on that, considering that the wannabe politicians, wannabe ministers of government, I imagine, who are still budding and can't get out of the bud. You know, go public and make statements about what's happening at the institution. And so, Mr. Speaker, I give notice that our attention will be focusing on privilege in particular of doctors, because I believe that we have to be careful. If this is the way doctors who operate there on privilege are conducting themselves in the public square, I have to be concerned about liability issues. And so, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say that this is a pilot project undertaken by the institution, consensus by everyone, all departments, at a meeting held since the 6th of June. And that's what's going on at the moment. So, without saying much about what the wannabe doctors are doing and what they say, let it be understood that this government is undertaking a proper project, because we will be able to be informed by this project how to conduct the business of the hospital going forward. Mr. Speaker, I also want to touch on housing, because again in the public square, a member of the opposition has had much to say. We are not doing things in his constituency. Let me say, Mr. Speaker, this ministry, this government, some people speak in constituency terms. We go to where the need is. And if the member opposite could say in the public square that we've only built a townhouse, 5 units, perhaps he does not walk his constituency enough. Because if he did, he will know that on private land in the very constituency to which he referred, there are 6 persons who have had homes built on land given out by the previous administration. Perhaps they need to walk some more. Maybe the sole of his shoes are still new. Mr. Speaker, he would know. He would not be saying that things are not happening in other constituencies, because he will know that in Newton Ground and Lavington, what happened to be in constituency 6, there have been 6 houses already constructed there. And he will know, or perhaps he's just been deliberate and trying to be fooling people. I don't know if you want to call it a lie, but maybe that's not parliamentary, so if it is a deliberate untruth, if it's a deliberate misrepresentation, it's still a lie. But in Newton Ground and Lavington, we have already constructed 6. And we have another 12 right now starting in St. Paul's, Rollins, and other places. We're not leaving any place out. In this country, every community where there is need is being satisfied by the housing program conducted under the ministry through NHC. Let me indicate also that it was only a few weeks ago, months ago, in Deep Bay, where we offered a home to an indigent person. He doesn't have to pay, because that is how this government operates. And it has nothing to do with whether the member of parliament is a member of the executive branch or not. We deliver services in every area of the country. They put it in constituency terms, and I will speak to it in constituency terms. In terms of constituency number 6, they have been the beneficiary of the program of construction that the NAC is undertaking. And to add to that, Mr. Speaker, so far, we began a project last year, May, and despite the disruption with the hurricanes, we have completed 139 homes from that particular program. Added to the 84 we delivered already. Now, why I mentioned the 84? Because the statement went on to talk about those 84 as well. Truth be told, Mr. Speaker, those homes were not budgeted for. We had to find the money. I had to go to the Minister of Finance to get an additional $11 million to complete them. So if I take credit for completing them, we borrowed $11 million to do so. And despite the fact that they rushed to deliver 12 in Sandy Point to avoid the Minister Richards getting an opportunity to benefit from any distribution. Despite that, we have been able to deliver 84. And in Mr. Grant's constituency, you see, they put me to talk constituency now.
You name it further. You name it, man.
And in the member for number 4 constituency, I don't want to name him.
Yeah, don't name it.
We did 3 at the estate there for young people. You remember those 3 gentlemen who were there abandoned? 4 gentlemen. They got their home. That's different to the 84. Huh? But you know, Mr. Speaker, I want to make this point clear. Our housing program is not just limited to NHC, you know. We have introduced HELP. HELP is a program that gives a grant of up to $10,000 to individuals where some of them have had no bathrooms and toilets for years, where their roof has been leaking again for years without any responses from the government. And that program is successful. We have already disbursed more than $1.5 million, and the total we intend to disburse overall before we stop is $3 million. We have that approved. HELP is a successful program. The people out there who are getting help know that the Team Unity administration is delivering on the HELP program and delivering to them. And let me add, Mr. Speaker, that has nothing to do with the hurricane relief, you know. There are so many individuals out there right now, thanks again to the Minister of Finance, who are getting additional help to repair their roof from the damage last year. And everywhere you turn now, some people who never even thought they will get help wouldn't stop calling your telephone. We are responding, Mr. Speaker, to the needs of the people. It is not limited to that. The Development Bank has $30 million available to it to help provide financing for public servants. So public servants can do their own mortgage up to $300,000. So at low interest rate, 5% interest, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, when we distributed the homes under the Unity Housing Program, do you know what this government has done? This government has indicated and has been delivering household income less than $3,000. The interest rate on their mortgage is only 2%. The best in the world.
Yes.
2%. I know, Mr. Speaker, we also have our private business places engaged. It was only a few weeks ago we engaged with one business partner to provide land for them to develop middle to income housing programs. Because we understand NAC is only building for a certain level, and some people may still not be able to move the banks. But private sector engagement is being undertaken to fill that gap. And Mr. Speaker, what is new is Wellington Road. I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, if you've driven to that side of the country, you will see that it is already being protected from the traffic. Equipment is already there. We already had a signing ceremony there. In constituency number 1. Yes. My colleague here is smiling because, you know, he has been looking for this to be delivered for some time. And so what you have done, my brother, is because that is taking place in number 1, you have made number 2 very jealous. And that in number 2, they have signaled all on the radio that they're ready for the same thing to happen in Central Bastia. And so I can assure you. Say it again? Oh, yes, thank you. The number of units in number 1, 10 buildings, 60 units. We'll go right there near Wellington Road. 60 units.
60 families.
60 families multiplied by 4. See how many persons that affect. And that's what is going to be taking place right there. It's taking place right there at Wellington Road. And Central Bastia has begun to become jealous now. But we have been thinking about it for some time. In fact, it is one of the reasons why I urged the Minister of Education to relocate the headquarters of the Ministry of Education so that we can undertake something in Central Bastia. That time will come and we'll see it. And Mr. Speaker, the point is, when persons go on the radio to speak about housing in pejorative terms, they must go with the facts. Not with what they think it is, but what they know it is. And if they don't know, shut up. Because the facts and what they speak on radio are two different things. The housing program of the government is going along quite nicely. And I'll tell you something else, Mr. Speaker. We have the Minister of Public Infrastructure here who will be undertaking roads in areas where the previous administration failed to put roads. So that persons with land, some 6,000 of them, who have land in their name, have not been able to do any construction.
Maybe helicopter.
No public, no infrastructure. They will need a helicopter to get to their land, you're right. But the Minister of Public Infrastructure is here, and I'm sure at some opportunity he will tell you that it is being undertaken to put roads in some areas now to give persons an opportunity. Some of them already can move their own banks to be able to construct their homes in some of those areas. And so, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to make that statement on housing. I should also add, Mr. Speaker, one more thing to my statement, and that is, Mr. Speaker, I intended to travel next week to Costa Rica, and I'm going for one particular reason. In fact, two. One, we have had John Deere tractors bought by the previous administration that have been out of work, out of commission for a little while. Why? Because no arrangement, it appears, have been made for the correct persons to be trained in having to repair those tractors. And it took a trip to Guyana, where I learned from the Guyanese John Deere tractors dealers where my tractors were bought, what date they were bought, what upgrade they needed. And a week or two ago, in fact, the week of the music festival, we were able to get a John Deere dealer, John Deere specialist to come into St. Kitts and to bring the John Deere mechanic from Nevis. Together they worked on how to go about repairing those 3 tractors. We want those tractors to go working. But what is more, why I'm going to this meeting, I want to impress upon AICA to assist us with the training necessary. Who? Well, it's one of our partners, one of our agricultural partners. And it is right, we have an office in St. Kitts. It is headed by the gentleman from Nevis, Augustine Merchant. And I know that Miss Green works there. And so I was going for 2 things. One is to see how best, because this is a board meeting, how I can get the board to agree to fund the training of 1, if not more, of our mechanics in St. Kitts and Nevis to be able to keep those tractors in good condition. I know there's a training program offered in the United States, and that is one of the things I will go to try and achieve. And the second thing, Mr. Speaker, which I learned, is that we have people who work for these institutions at certain levels who are not yet benefiting from any pension program. It is my intention to make that an important feature of the discussion, because here in St. Kitts we have persons who work for that institution who we have to protect. And so I intend to get those 2 things raised when I go next week, so that those who are at a certain level can benefit from any pension program. You might wonder, Mr. Speaker, why that is so important to me. If you recall, when we came to office, we talked about pensions, and the Prime Minister mentioned it earlier, about the non-established workers whom we are working on. But I also insisted on National Housing Corporation, Solid Waste, having a pension program, which have started in 2017. Because there's always, I think the Prime Minister put it this way, there's the rainy day, and of course there's the dry day, the drought. The day will come when our incomes are reduced because we either retire or maybe sick. And how do you then supplement your income if you do not have things in place to be able to bring you that income? Pension funds, private and otherwise, contribute to what the Social Security does and puts us in a position to be, I will say, to be more financially independent. To be more financially independent in the dry part of our lives, in the days when we are not earning so well. And so that is why, Mr. Speaker, I think it's so important to inform the country, because when I listen to the radio sometimes, not all times, some of the things which are being said by those in opposition really should be stamped out, because it does not represent what the people in this parliament, especially the people in parliament, represent what the parliament is all about. Speak the truth when you get on the radio, or shut up. Mr. Speaker, may it please you.
Stay up to date with news, programs, and activities of the government with SKNIS. Like us on Facebook. Listen to us on SoundCloud. Follow us on Twitter. And watch our videos on YouTube. Connect with us today. SKNIS, St. Kitts and Nevis Information Service.